Okay, what makes an artwork magnetic? Have you ever thought of that before? What makes an artwork magnetic? Now, this is a powerful question that most artists will want to ask. What exactly would glue me to a work of art? What would want to make me look at this work, look at it over and over and over and over and over again? What is that interesting line? What is those strokes? What's those things that you can actually place in your work of art that can make it come out very sound and nice? Is it the application of colors? Then what about you're not using colors? Is it the application of tones? Is it how you hold your pencil, your brush? What is that secret that makes a work of art magical and magnetic? So looking at the image now, you see how interesting it turned out to be. Now then you'll be forced now to ask yourself, whoa, how did this guy get to this point of getting this thing to be this real and interesting? Now that is exactly what we're going to look at in the course of the study to check. Now for those of you that are just joining us now, this is the part 3 of this class. So let's dive into the study. Now today we'll be looking at shading and shading techniques. Now this is the part 3 of this class. We've been talking about shading and shading techniques. Why would a work of art look magical? What makes it interesting? What we've been talking about. Now we are going to look about what will make this art a magnet to keep you through the work. So let's look at our specific objective. Now we've talked about scribbling or scribble. Now we are going to look at tonal value and the definition of tonal value, and which is also called tonal gradation. Then we're also going to look at the dark tone, the mid tone, and the highlight. And finally, we are also going to talk about what? Shadow. All these we're going to cover in the course of the study, and then we take it up from there. All right. Scribbling. Scribbling or scubbling. It's a form of shading. It is really fun and much faster than the hatching or stippling. It also creates a really kind of interesting and professional look, or look as a work of art. Now, scribbling entails the making of a work of art with careless lines. Subsequent class, I explained this in details. And now, when you hear the word scribble, as the name implies, scribble, it just means shading with scribbles. That is what it is. Using scribbles to shade. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, you use the awareness of the forms and light and shade, object, shape, style that is around you now to relate or to bring it into what? Scribbling. Now, by the time you start scribble, in different degrees, in different density to create an illusion or form, then automatically you create something. So I have a lot of pictures of people or a lot of artists I know that they are scribble artists. From scribble we have the doodle artists. So from then, we start getting the Dadaism and the Surrealism and all that. But however, it is a style in painting that can actually get you to chiaroscuro. Are you hearing chiaroscuro from the first time? And then go back to the first part of this video. Go and look for it, part 1 of this video, so you know the meaning of the word chiaroscuro. But to kill every benefit of doubt, let me just tell you what chiaroscuro is. Now, this is the end point of shading, where you've shaded something to the peak, to the end, and then if you do anything outside that, it starts breaking, it starts distorting. So now that is exactly what chiaroscuro is. It is the finest point of what? Shading. You can achieve that with any kind of shading. You can achieve it with scribbling, you can achieve it with smudge, blurring, you can achieve it with anything. Now, all these are the things that makes your work magnetic. So if you know all those things and apply them properly according to what you're doing, then automatically you make, even with scribble, imagine you using circle, scribble, and then use it to create your dad's portrait. Your dad will come back and will be like, whoa, how did you get that? So those are the things that makes a work of art, magnetic and what? Interesting. Okay, now you've seen this image in part 2. This is just a recap so that you understand it in depth of what I'm trying to talk about. Now, because if you sideline scribble, because a lot of artists don't even consider it, but I will advise you, if you really want to take this serious, I will advise you to go into scribbling art. That might be the future, you never can tell. Because everybody is doing realism, pointillism, If you can pick scribble as your style, amazing. You just create your own edge or your niche, and that will be awesome for you. So you can just give it a try and practice the art of what? Scribbling. Now, unlike hatching and stippling and scumbling, that does not require patience and consistency, and that does require patience and consistency. Scribbling does not require patience and even consistency. You just play and have fun and then come out with what? A powerful work of art. It is actually the opposite of them. Using swift, natural, random scribbles, you build upwards your amazing form. All right. So now today let's look at tonal value. What exactly is the meaning of the word tonal value? Now, you can see a question in your exam. Another name for shading is what? It's tonal value. Now, shading cannot be achieved without the grading of tones. So where there is no tone, there is no shading. Oh yes, because shading involves the movement of what? Light from the darkest point to the what? To the lightest point, or from the movement from the lightest point to the darkest point, vice versa. Just like you want to define osmosis, you say the movement of water molecule from the highest concentration to the lower concentration between its semi-permeable membrane. For those of you that is offering science, but I'm your art now, yes, but everything is involved while we are talking about this particular topic. So, however, tonal value is the osmosis in art, just like we have osmosis in biology. So tonal value represents that vacuum. You understand? So it's explaining your ability to control light from the darkest point down to the lightest point. It crescends. You understand? It moves into the brightest point or zoop into the darkest point. Now this effect is shown with good application of tones and value, also known as what? Tonal gradation. So when you hear the word gradation, it's movement. Graduation, I graduated into, but this time we say gradation, not graduation. You understand? So we grade into light or we grade out of light. So either which way, that is what tonal value explains. So your ability to understand this, how to apply the tonal gradation, the tonal value in your work of art, brother, you will create works that will be magnetic, like it will keep people there and fixed in your work. So allowing painting and drawing and just drawing things without properly observing this tonal value, which is what we are learning now. First of all, remember the question I asked you is, how do I make my work, or how do you make a work of art magnetic? Now, this is one secret. Understanding the phenomenon or the principles of what? Tonal gradation or tonal value, which I told you tonal value is the shading, as in is the effect in showing with good application of tonal value, to show the difference between the dark point and what? The lightest what? Point, which is known as tonal gradation. Now, a well-graded composition with tones from the darkest to the lightest will add value to a drawing or painting. Now, you see that a well-graded composition, but a poorly graded composition as well, with tones of careless light and careless dark, will also reduce the value of what? Your drawing. So whenever you're doing any of those things, you put that at the back of your mind, that what will actually make this work magnetic, what will keep people there, is your application of the tonal gradation. So a well-graded composition with tones from the darkest to the lightest will add value to the drawing or painting. All right. So we are going to see what this guy did with shades. Without your pencil. Now he took his time and then showed your ability to create things with dark tones. And then he started throwing light in them, pushing out things a step after another, dropping the dark points, dropping the highlights, and then throwing everything. At the end of the day, he came up with this beautiful dancer of a lady. So now this can only be achieved when you understand. You see, you are magneted to the scene. You are magneted to the screen now, looking at that stuff. Now, that can only be achieved if you understand how to apply what? Tones and values. You understand? You understand how to increase light, darkens the light, show the highlight, as in put all these things in place to come up with an amazing work. At the end of the day, what he's creating is a girl that is sitting in a lonely room on a chair, folding his hands. Maybe she's scared, thinking of how will my life look like, what will my life be. So that is done without your regular pencil. It is done with a charcoal. So The only way one can achieve that, if you understand, that is only when if you've understood, how to manipulate or how to manage the tonal gradation. Now, let me show you this. Now, what exactly is the definition of this tonal gradation? Tonal value, also called tonal gradation, is the gradual use of brightness and darkness and color to show the effect of light and shade in a drawing or painting. Let me take it again. Now, what is tonal gradation or tonal value? It is the gradual use of brightness and the darkness and color to show the effect of light and shade in a drawing on a work of art. So now let's go back. I guess if we go back, we will now understand exactly what that video entails, because now that now explains this video. Now watch, it was a very white background with nothing, and then he started introducing dark, punching out the dark, continuous punching of the dark tones, and then gradually, like I told you, it is the gradual, it is crescending. You start from the light, and then you start adding, and the place you need to add more, you add, until you mold the work. It becomes something that you can actually feel or pick or carry out of what the work. So that is exactly what this artist did and what he was actually trying to explain. So whenever you ask what is tonal gradation, you just know that this is the gradual use of the brightness and the darkness in the color to show the effect of light and shade on a drawing or painting. All right, haven't gotten that. Now, the different tonal value are required to achieve good tonal value. Different tonal value are required to achieve good tonal value. They are dark tones, they are midi tones, and they are highlights. Just for the musicians, you have what we call the tone, you have the semitone, and the tone, semitone, tone. I don't know, for those of you that will be studying music, yes, you should know about the tone, the semitone. Like, the same thing applies to the art. We have the dark tone, the mid-tone, and the highlight, or the light tone. So these three comes together to give you chiaroscuro. Now, because of this study, I've been mentioning the word chiaroscuro over and over again. Yes, because it is the end point of what? Shading. It's getting to the climax, getting to the point of no return. You understand? That is the end point. The next thing is point of elasticity. When you pass that point, it breaks. Okay, so now the different tones and value are required to achieve good tonal value. They are dark tones, mid-tones, and highlights. Other properties of tonal value are reflected light and shadow. Now, maybe it was the second part, the part 2, that I told you I'm going to explain exactly what the tonal value represents, and the reflected light and the shadow is. So now, what exactly is the shadow and what exactly is the reflected light? But before we get there, let's define what exactly darktone is. Now, this is the darkest shade that assists to depict the roundness and form. Now, darktone is hidden from the source of what? Light. Any place that is behind light becomes dark. It falls against the dark part, so it becomes dark. So the darktone represents what? The place that is behind the light source. For the fact that I'm staying in front of this camera and there's a light in front of me, my face is lighted. Now you can see everything, but you cannot, if you're drawing, you can't see my back because it is not in your viewpoint. Now imagine if they take this light off this way, and then this other light this side is not shining, and then the only light we have is just this one that is here. Automatically this place will be dark, and it now create this Rembrandt effect. There's what we call the Rembrandt effect. For those of you that who want to study photography, it's not what I will be explaining now, but however, that is exactly what that is. So now darktone is the hidden form, is hidden from the source of light. Now if the degree of light on an object is much, now darktone is always slight or little. But when the effect of light is little, then darktone is what? Dominant and seen what? Seen in that composition. Now what is this? What I'm trying to explain here now is, if this video is shot under a very low light scene, automatically you see more of the shadows on my back, and you see a lot of shadows, you see some things that might, cause distractions. That does not mean it is not good. There are some effects. In fact, low light, as the word implies, is a concept in both in cinematography and in photography. So there are some persons that love the low light kind of scene. Their shootings is on a low light tone. The movie is low light, not too bright, not too shouty. For those of you, most of us Nigerians that have watched Blood Sister, that's a perfect example of a low light scene. Now it is shot, on a moderate and average light. So that's exactly what I am trying to explain there. Where you have a low light, you produce more darker images. Where you have a brighter light, you produce more lighter images in your composition. So dark tones dominate in darker scene, while lighter tones dominate in brighter scene. All right. So now dark tone is closer to the shadow of the object because they are reflected light between them. Now that brings me to what reflected light is. In as much as I will still define it in the course of the study. But you see, the dark part of it goes line in line or hand in hand with your shadow. For example, if you're walking on the street and the sunlight is coming from your head, your shadow will be cast by the down, on the floor, by your right. Now, if you watch, your shadow is straight, it will pick from your leg and then spread. The shadow that is closer to your leg is darker than your head. In as much as sometimes, the image will be the same in your eyes. But if you measure the light, you discover that the one just straight from your leg is darker than the one that is way above or outside your leg. Sometimes it even vanishes. So that's exactly what this thing explains. And meanwhile, there is a break, there is a reflected light between your leg and the shadow. It happens everywhere, anytime. Everywhere and anytime. I wish I have something to show you as an example so that you understand the concept of what this dark tone and highlight and the reflected light. So to every place where there is darkness, there is a touch of light somewhere. Unless there is all darkness all through, you cannot see anything. But if there is, let me say, if this is an apple and then the light is hitting here and this place is dark, watch, you see a very sharp reflected light here. Because by the time the light hits here, it will bounce on the wall and then create that sharp effect that will separate that object from the shadow. But whereby the apple is being taken, the shot is taken in the place where there is no wall or no background. Then when the light hits, it falls off and then you get the shadow. But yet, however, you still see the reflected light somewhere. Okay, now, beautiful. Now let me use the image of this handsome boy. Okay, just take your time and then observe the hair. The hair. And the shading between his nose. If you watch behind here, you see that highlight. Automatically, that place should be dark because the light hits on his nose and then falls off. But it hits on his body and then his shirt now casted this reflected light here to differentiate the nose from his chin. I wish you can really understand what I'm trying to explain, but just bear it at the back of your mind that we have what we call the reflected light that comes before the shadow. Now let's look at the next one, which is our mid-tone. Now mid-tone is also called half-tone. Just like we have the dark tone, we have the mid-tone, which is also known as what? The half-tone or semitone. Now it's the level that blends the dark tone with the light tone. Now you cannot just bring light and darkness together. There should be a mediator. So I was explaining exactly what marriage is, to somebody. I'm sorry I'm bringing everything in this course of the study, but I want to bring it so that you understand. Now, the marriage of a man and a woman. Let's say the woman is the light tone, and the man is the dark tone. So who serves as the mid-tone? Then it's God. That's where God comes in as the mid-tone to bring the two of them together. He serves as the bind that binds them together. If you remove God, they will fall apart. Exactly the same thing that happens to what? To shading. So if you remove the mid-tone and then you bring the light and you create a disaster. Nothing goes like that. You cannot just from here, boom, you appear in America. And there is a process. Even if you want to teleport, there is a process for you to teleport. There is time in between. So nothing just happened. So that mid-tone serves as the blender between the dark tone and the light tone. I hope you're understanding exactly what I'm saying. So, having said this, now it is the level that blends the dark tone and the light. A good blend of this level is between the dark tone and the highest light. Also added value to the actual roundness in the form of the object. What I'm trying to say is, if you know how to manipulate this mid-tone, because everything happens between the mid-tone and the highest light. So if you're bad with manipulating the mid-tone, because it is the mid-tone that is the embodiment of what? The gradation. The dark tone is the dark tone, it is static. But the mid-tone crescends. It graduates. into the highest light. So if you cannot manipulate the mid-tone, automatically your works will be bad. Little wonder if you spread a color chart in your computer. For those of you that know what the color chart is, your color wheel. Your color wheel. You see how the color mix. From yellow, it goes down to orange. From yellow, or for bright yellow, sunny yellow, it goes down to normal yellow. From normal yellow, it comes down to yellow ochre. From yellow ochre to your yellow orange. From yellow orange to orange. From your orange to now semi-orange, like that looks like red. From that semi-orange that looks like red, it falls into the red. Meanwhile, you have this carrot tone there in between as it crescends. So inside that particular one color, like from red to yellow, you can get up to 1 million colors, a million grades in them before you achieve your final grade. So that's exactly what this mid-tone embedded or is trying to explain. All right. Now, these effects also depend on the degree of light, on the composition, and your skill. So if you're bad with manipulating this effect, automatically you're creating a bad work, period. Your work cannot be magnetic. So the only way you can make your work magnetic is your ability to understand the mid-tone. Now, did you get that question answered? Oh, yes. So the secret of making any work of art magnetic is your ability to understand how to apply the mid-tone, which is as well known as what? The tonal gradation. So if you can apply the tonal gradation effectively and efficiently, oh my brother, you will keep people on your work of art for a longer time. Okay, I haven't said that. Now let's look at the last one. Now look at this boy. If you watch the face, the light is coming straight from his face. And then if you see this other place is quite dark. And then at the back of his hair is looking as if it's a little bit light. Now that is the effect, because when the light hits on the wall, automatically the boy is standing behind the wall. When the light hits on the wall, it will bounce back on his head. So the place that will catch the real darkness is the middle of his face. Looking at the picture you have there, to that explain. Now if you watch, you will see the grading, how it moves. You understand? From the brightest, it's moving down to the darkest. And then it goes again to the brightest. So that's just exactly what tonal gradation implies. Now highlights. Now this is the brightest level in tonal value. It is the highest point, the overexposed level. Now it is highly exposed to the source of light. It is open to the height of the source of light. Now highlight, I don't know if you're looking at my face, because of the effect of the light, you can actually pick my highlight on my face. Most times it appears on my nose, sometimes my chin here, sometimes here, they gain the highlight. So these are the places, and my lips most times gain the light. All right. So the highlight is the place that is more exposed to the source of light. Highlight will be more glaring if the object receives more light. To show the roundness in this form, in a composition, you need to imply or impose more light on the object. Now I'm looking at the camera here. I can just see the highlight. I can actually pick my highlight, and that alone, if I want to be crazy with some of the paintings, I can actually choose to start highlighting them. Boom, boom. By the time I drop all the highlights, automatically I've brought out the image. So I start bringing out my semitone, my middle tone, and then the dark tone, and the work of art is completed, just like the video you saw. Now let's look at the properties of tone, of tonal value. Now there are two major properties of tonal value, and these include the reflected light and the shadow. So whenever you hear the word in your WAEC, they ask you, what are the two properties of tonal value? You just know that it's what? Reflected light and what? The shadow. Now other properties of the tonal value includes reflected light, like I say, and shadow. Now what is reflected light? Now reflected light is the sharp, slim light seen or used in between shadow and dark tone. That sharp, slim light you see in between the shadow and dark tone explains the reflected light. Did you understand that? So whenever you're drawing or you're doing anything, you're shading, just learn to apply that. Whenever you're drawing or shading, just learn to apply that. It is the sharp light in between the dark tone and the shadow. It is known as the reflected light. I showed you the painting of the boy. Why will his hair be white? Does he have a white? Does it mean he really had a white hair? No, but that was the effect of the reflected light. All right. So now finally, let's look at shadow. Now shadow. Now this is the dark shape that the form of a person or a thing makes on the surface, like ground, on the wall, between the surface and light. Now shadow assumes the image of the form. Shadows, they are like block that is blocking a light. So, sorry, like when you block, if you're blocking the source of light, automatically you create the replica image of that. We call it, most times we call it silhouette. You create a silhouette of yourself. You can as well call the silhouette the black or the shadow of that person. Your shadow is your silhouette. So I can say, if I want to tease you, I can say, define silhouette. What I'm just asking you to define is define shadow. All right. So let's continue. Now, the reflecting effect of shadow also depends on the degree of light cast on this object or cast on any object. Shadow becomes sharp and darker or even dark when the light is intense or brightest, especially sunny days. But when the source of light is dull, shadow becomes pale, as observed during the rainy days. So whenever the sun is very high and bright, man, there is sharp shadow. But whenever the entire atmosphere is dark as if it wants to rain, you see pale shadow. Okay. So now let's look at the normal shadow. What is exactly the normal shadow? It is also influenced by the time of the day. On a bright morning, shadow is stretched to an extent. In the mid-afternoon, shadow becomes foreshortened under the subject it is reflecting. Now in the evening, the shadow becomes stretched again. So that is exactly how the normal shadow operates. It influences, the time of the day that the shadow is being seen. Okay, having said this, I would want you to look at this work of art and then observe how the artist created his image, and then observe how he, make use of what? The blend in the tonal gradation. You see, he started dropping the dark tones. Gradually, he's dropping the dark tones. That's the shadow that he's casting. And then I will show you exactly what I'm trying to explain. Now, if you watch, you will see that this place is having a little bright highlight. No matter his shading, he will not darken that place that much. You can actually differentiate between, the shadow and the body of the effect and the body of the real object. So now this light you're seeing here is known as what? The reflected light. Now to every drawing, there must definitely be a reflected light. Now that is what will give you that magnetic effect. It is only when you observe that effect that you can actually get that. Now what I'm trying to say, you see how beautiful this is. Just a male circle, but he has actually converted that circle into something that you feel like that you can actually pick out. It's like a ball you can actually pick out. Now this shows the reflected light. Now if you watch here on top of this body, you see the reflected light because the light coming here bounced on the floor, and then the floor casted this reflected light here that splitted the shadow from the main object. Now having this at the back of your mind, you will create a work of art that will not just be beautiful, but they will be magical and magnetic to the eyes. So having talked about all these things now, I want to believe that you understood and then you've grabbed everything that is concerned about shading. So no matter any question they ask you in your WAEC, anywhere, you can actually explain what shading is and what shading is all about. Okay, now to be sure that you really understood everything we talked about so far, let's do a recap of what we've said so far. Now, first of all, start with what? Cobbling or scribbling. That was the first thing we talked about. We also talked about tonal value, and then we move further to talk about tonal definition and the definition of tonal gradation and tonal value. Then we talked about the dark tone, talked about the middle tone, talked about the highlight, we talked about the shadow, talked about the reflective light, and then we also finally talked about the normal light. And then I went further to show you some videos that really truly explain some of those things we've discussed for the past few, parts and minutes or hours. All right. So thank you so very much. Now let's see some of those questions to try our hands based on what we've just talked about. Now, what is tonal value? What is tonal value? I want to believe you can give an answer to that question. If you can't, go back to the video and watch it over again so you can give me the answer to that question. What exactly is tonal value? And then finally, I want to mention two properties of tonal gradation. Mention two properties of tonal value. All right. Thank you very much for being a part of this class. So now let's go over to our exam guide and then let's try our hands on some questions and then we'll give answers to these questions. Okay. the ability to indicate a source of light in an object is what? What is the ability to indicate a source of light in an object? This question is so profound, and then is, so what is the ability? Is it drawing? Is it expression? Is it outlining? Is it sketching? Or is it shading? It is shading. Shading is the ability to indicate a source of light. It is only with shading that you can actually indicate that. And that's giving us what? D as our answer. Okay, let's answer another one. Okay, now let's answer question 8. Question 8. Smudging shading can be achieved by rubbing on with the following except A, brush, fingertip, hand, piece of foam, or rug. Is it rug or rag? Or rag. So what exactly can you achieve smudging? And meanwhile, what is smudging? Smudging is a type of shading that we talked about that is either blurring or smudging. So what exactly do you think the answer is? The answer is what? We pick your rag. Don't use rag to smudge. But most times some other persons do anyway. So, all right. So let's take our final question. Now, the techniques of shading in the drawing below is dash. What do you think is the techniques of shading in this drawing? Observe the drawing. Is it cross-hatching? Is it blurring? Is it hatching? Is it pointillism? Is it rubbing? So what shading is that? What did I hear you say? Pointillism, you're wrong. Blurring, you're very wrong. Cross-hatching, you're wrong. Rubbing, you're very, very wrong. Now the correct answer there is hatching. You're very correct. If you choose hatching, that is the correct answer to this question. Thank you for participating in today's class. You can practice more questions using the exam guide. Now the app scores and give a detailed explanation of all the questions at the end of your practice test. Now you can learn a particular topic of interest with different modes like study mode, mock mode, and practice mode. It also have other features that make learning fun. Now it is a must-have for all serious students. Download the app from www.examguide.com if you don't have it yet. See you in the next class. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and then share this video to anyone you know that would benefit from it. Thank you, and bye-bye.